Hello, my friends, and welcome back to my channel, Real English Fluency. Today, you will learn English through a powerful story. A wise king is looking for the next leader of his kingdom. Many people think they deserve the crown, but the king believes actions are more important than words. So he prepares several secret tests. Nobody knows when the tests will begin or who will pass them. Stay until the end because the king's final choice may change the way you see yourself. Comment below. What is more important, words or actions? Chapter 1. The king's big question. Long ago, there was a peaceful kingdom. The people loved their king. He was kind, fair, and honest. He listened to everyone with respect. Rich people, poor people, young people, and old people all trusted him. The kingdom was happy because the king always made wise decisions. But as the years passed, the king became old. One evening he stood near the palace window and looked at his people. A smile was on his face, but there was also worry in his heart. One day, he said quietly, "I must choose a new leader. My people deserve someone they can trust." Many people wanted to wear the crown. Rich merchants believed money made them the best choice. Brave soldiers believed strength was enough. Famous teachers believed knowledge was the greatest gift. Every person thought they were ready to lead the kingdom. The king watched them for many months, but he still could not choose anyone. He knew that a leader was not known by words alone. A leader was known by actions. A few days later, a royal message spread across the kingdom. Every person was invited to the palace. Early the next morning, people came from every village and town. The great hall was full of excitement. Everyone hoped something important would happen. Rich merchants wore expensive clothes. Soldiers stood proudly. Teachers smiled with confidence. At the back of the hall stood a young man named Ethan. He came from a poor family. His clothes were simple but clean. He never tried to look important. Since his father had died, Ethan had worked hard to help his mother. Life was not easy, but his mother always gave him the same advice. "Never lose your honesty," she often said. "People may forget your words, but they will always remember your actions." Ethan carried those words in his heart every day. After a few moments, the king entered the hall. The room became silent. He looked at the people with a warm smile and asked, "What makes a person truly great?" The question surprised everyone. A rich merchant quickly stood up. "Money makes a person great," he said proudly. Many people agreed. Then a brave soldier stepped forward. "Strength makes a person great," he said with confidence. Again, many people nodded. An old teacher smiled and said, "Knowledge makes a person great because wisdom leads people in the right direction." Soon the hall was full of different answers. Some people said power, others said beauty, talent, or luck. Everyone wanted the king to believe them. Ethan stayed quiet. A young man standing beside him smiled and whispered, "Why are you silent? This is your chance to impress the king." Ethan smiled politely and replied, "I want to listen first." The young man laughed. Quiet people never become leaders. Ethan did not answer. Across the hall, the king noticed everything. He heard the words, but he also watched the people. Some smiled only when he looked at them. Some pushed others to stand closer to the throne. Some spoke about kindness, but they treated others with little respect. The king understood something very clearly. Words were easy. Actions told the real story. The king slowly raised his hand, and the hall became silent again. "Today I heard many wonderful answers," he said. "But I cannot choose the next leader by listening to speeches. During the coming days, I will hold several tests. Some tests will be easy, some will be difficult. Some of you may not even know when a test has begun. I will not judge your money, your strength, or your beautiful words. I will watch your actions. At the end of these tests, your actions will choose the next leader of this kingdom." The hall filled with whispers. Everyone looked at one another. Some people smiled with confidence. Others became nervous. A rich merchant quietly said, "No matter what the tests are, I will win." A soldier proudly folded his arms. Ethan remained silent. He did not know what the king had planned, but he knew one thing. Every choice from that day onward could change his future. The king smiled gently, turned around, and walked out of the hall. As everyone left the palace, only one question remained in their minds. What would the king's first test be? Chapter 2. The First Test. The next morning, the whole kingdom woke up before sunrise. Nobody wanted to be late. People believed the king's first test would decide everything. The roads leading to the palace were full of people. Rich merchants came in beautiful clothes. Soldiers walked with confidence. Teachers carried books. Young men smiled proudly as they talked about becoming the next leader. Everyone was thinking about winning. Ethan also started his journey early. His mother smiled before he left. She gently held his hand and said, "Do your best. Do what is right. The result is not in your hands." Ethan nodded and quietly walked toward the palace. As he came closer to the palace, he noticed something strange. The main road was covered with small stones, broken branches, and sharp pieces of wood. Walking was difficult. An old man almost fell to the ground. A little girl was crying because she could not walk safely. A woman carrying a basket dropped some of her fruit. People looked at them, but nobody stopped. Everyone was in a hurry. They wanted to reach the palace first. One rich merchant carefully stepped over the branches. "Someone should clean this road," he complained as he continued walking. A soldier moved a few stones away from his own path and quickly left. A group of young men laughed and ran past the old man without helping him. They believed reaching the palace early was more important than helping others. Ethan stopped walking. He looked at the people around him. Then he looked at the old man who was trying to stand again. Without saying a word, Ethan put down his small bag. He helped the old man stand up. Then he carried the old man's walking stick and walked with him for a few steps. The old man smiled with grateful eyes. "Thank you, son," he said softly. Ethan smiled back. "You are welcome," he replied. After helping the old man, Ethan looked at the road once more. He bent down and started picking up the stones. He moved the broken branches to one side. It was not easy work. His hands became dusty. Sweat rolled down his face. Some people looked at him and laughed. "What are you doing?" one man shouted. "You will miss the test," another man said. A young merchant smiled and said, "The king is waiting inside the palace, not here on the road." Ethan heard every word, but he kept working. After a few minutes, the road became much safer. The little girl crossed the path with a happy smile. The woman collected her fruit without fear. More people could now walk safely toward the palace. Only then did Ethan continue his journey. When he finally reached the palace, Almost everyone had already arrived. He quietly stood at the back of the hall. Some people looked at his dusty clothes and dirty hands. One man laughed. "You are late." Another smiled proudly. "You spent your time cleaning the road. Now you have lost your chance." Ethan said nothing. He took a deep breath and waited. A few moments later, the king entered the hall. His face was calm. He looked at every person very carefully. Then he asked one simple question. Who cleaned the road outside the palace? The hall became silent. People looked at one another, but nobody answered. After a few seconds, Ethan slowly raised his hand. "I did, Your Majesty," he said. The king smiled. "I know." The people looked at the king with surprise. The king continued. "The road was today's first test. I wanted to see who would think about others before thinking about themselves. I wanted to see who would help without being asked." The room became completely quiet. The rich merchant lowered his head. The soldier looked at the floor. Many people felt ashamed. The king walked toward Ethan. "You arrived late," he said with a smile, "but you passed the test before you entered this palace." Ethan's eyes became wet. He had never expected those words. The king turned toward the crowd. "Many people spoke about kindness yesterday," he said. "Today only one person showed it. Remember this lesson? Beautiful words can touch the ears, but good actions touch the heart." Nobody clapped. Nobody spoke. Everyone understood the king's message. For the first time, they realized that this competition was not about becoming the next leader. It was about becoming a better person. Ethan quietly looked at the king. Deep inside, he felt that the hardest test was still waiting for him. Chapter 3: The Empty Pot. After the first test, the whole kingdom was talking about Ethan. Some people admired him. Some people laughed at him. Others said he had only been lucky. Ethan did not answer anyone. He returned home and lived the same simple life. He worked with his mother every day. He carried water. He cleaned the small house. He helped his neighbors when they needed him. He did not think about becoming the next leader. He only wanted to become a better person. A few days later, the king invited everyone to the palace again. The large hall was full of people. This time, the king did not ask any questions. He smiled and gave each person a small clay pot and a few wheat seeds. "Plant these seeds," he said. "Take care of them every day. Return after 1 month." Everyone smiled because the test looked easy. People thanked the king and hurried home. On the way, many talked about how beautiful their plants would become. Ethan reached home and showed the seeds to his mother. She smiled and said, "Take good care of them. Good things need time." Ethan planted the seeds carefully. Every morning he gave them water. Every evening he checked the soil. 1 week passed. Nothing grew. 2 weeks passed. Still nothing. Ethan became worried. He changed the place of the pot so it could get more sunlight. He watered it carefully. He even changed the soil because he thought he had made a mistake. Still, the pot stayed empty. Every day he looked at it with hope. Every day he walked away with disappointment. Sometimes he sat beside the pot and quietly asked himself, "Why are my seeds not growing?" His mother saw the sadness on his face. She placed her hand on his shoulder and said, "If you have done your best, never be afraid of the truth." Those words gave Ethan a little courage, but he still felt nervous. At last, the day arrived. People returned to the palace carrying beautiful green plants. Some plants were tall, some had fresh leaves, some even had small flowers. Everyone smiled proudly as they looked at one another. Ethan walked slowly with his empty pot in his hands. His heart was beating fast. He wanted to turn back many times, but he remembered his mother's words. When he entered the palace, people started whispering. A young man laughed loudly. "Look at Ethan," he said. "He could not even grow one small plant." Others smiled and shook their heads. Ethan felt embarrassed, but he stayed calm. He stood quietly at the back of the hall with his empty pot. A few moments later, the king entered. He looked at every plant very carefully. Then he stopped in front of Ethan. The king looked at the empty pot and smiled. "Thank you for coming," he said kindly. Then he turned toward the crowd. "The seeds I gave you were boiled," he announced. "They could never grow. Anyone who brought a green plant changed the seeds." The hall became silent. The smiles disappeared from every face. People looked down because they understood what they had done. The king gently lifted Ethan's empty pot and said, "This is the only pot that tells the truth." Ethan was not afraid to be honest, even when everyone else looked successful. A person with an honest heart is worth more than 1,000 beautiful words. Ethan felt tears in his eyes. He had come to the palace expecting shame, but instead he earned respect. The people looked at him differently now. They finally understood that honesty is not shown when life is easy. Honesty is shown when telling the truth is difficult. That day, the empty pot became the strongest proof that a person's actions always speak louder than words. Chapter 4: The Lost Wallet. A few days passed after the second test. The people of the kingdom were still talking about Ethan. Some respected him more than before. Some still believed he was only lucky. The king heard every conversation, but he said nothing. He wanted the people to learn one more lesson. Early one morning, he invited everyone to the palace again. The people gathered with excitement. They believed this would be the final test. Some looked confident. Some looked nervous. Ethan arrived quietly. He greeted the palace guards with a smile and stood with the crowd. He did not think about winning. He only hoped he would do the right thing again. Before entering the palace hall, everyone had to walk through a beautiful garden. Colorful flowers covered both sides of the path. Tall trees gave cool shade. Birds were singing in the fresh morning air. Everything looked peaceful. Near the middle of the path, a small leather wallet was lying on the ground. It looked old, but it was full of shiny gold coins. The wallet was easy to see. The first man who noticed it quickly looked around. Nobody seemed to be watching. He picked it up, smiled quietly, and hid it inside his coat. Another man found a second wallet a little farther ahead. He also kept it. Soon, several people found wallets. Some looked surprised. Some looked happy. Nobody tried to find the owner. Everyone thought the money was a gift from good luck. A few minutes later, Ethan reached the same path. He noticed a wallet near a tree. He picked it up slowly. It felt heavy in his hands. He opened it for a moment and saw many gold coins. His heart started beating faster. He thought about his small house. He thought about his mother. He remembered the cold winter nights when they had very little food. With this money, he could buy warm clothes. He could repair their old roof. He could make his mother's life easier. For a few seconds, he stood completely still. No one was looking at him. No one would know if he kept the wallet. His mind became quiet. Then he remembered his mother's words. Never lose your honesty. Money can disappear. A good character stays with you forever. Ethan closed the wallet, took a deep breath, and walked straight to the palace guard. "Excuse me," Ethan said politely. "Someone has lost this wallet. Please return it to the owner." The guard smiled, accepted the wallet, and thanked him. Ethan nodded and entered the palace hall. His heart felt light. He had no gold in his hands, but he felt rich inside. After everyone arrived, the king walked into the hall. Beside him stood the palace guards. On a large table were all the wallets that had been placed along the garden path. The people looked at each other with surprise. Some suddenly became worried. The king looked across the hall and spoke in a calm voice. "Today, I did not lose these wallets. I placed them there." The room became completely silent. I wanted to see what each person would do when nobody was watching. Some people slowly lowered their heads. Others could not look at the king. Then the king called Ethan to stand beside him. "Ethan found a wallet," the king said. "He had every chance to keep it. Nobody was watching him. But he chose honesty instead of gold." The king smiled warmly. "Money can change your life for a short time. Good character can change your life forever." The people looked at Ethan with respect. At that moment, they understood something important. The greatest battles are not fought with swords. They are fought inside the heart. And every choice you make becomes part of the person you are. Chapter 5. The Final Decision. Several days passed after the third test. The whole kingdom was waiting for the king's decision. Every market, every street, and every home was filled with the same question. Who will become our new leader? Some people believed the richest merchant would still be chosen because he had great wealth. Others believed the strongest soldier deserved the crown because he could protect the kingdom. A few people quietly hoped Ethan would win, but they were not sure. Ethan never asked anyone to support him. He went back to his simple life. He worked in the fields. He helped his mother at home. He greeted people with kindness. He smiled at children. He respected old people. He did not change because people had started talking about him. He believed that a good person should do the right thing every day, not only during a test. One bright morning, the palace bells rang across the kingdom. Everyone knew the day had finally arrived. People hurried toward the palace from every direction. The great hall became full once again. This time, nobody was laughing. Nobody was speaking proudly. Every face showed hope and fear. Ethan stood quietly at the back of the hall. His hands were cold. His heart was beating fast. He looked at the king and then lowered his eyes. He was thankful for everything he had learned. Winning was no longer the most important thing to him. The old king slowly stood up. The hall became completely silent. "My dear people," he said with a gentle smile, "during these past weeks, I have watched every one of you. I did not only listen to your words, I watched your actions. I saw how you treated strangers. I saw what you did when nobody was watching. I saw your honesty, your kindness, and your choices." The king paused for a moment. Then he continued, "A leader is not the richest person." The hall stayed silent. "A leader is not the strongest person." Nobody moved. "A leader is the person people can trust." Those words touched every heart. The king looked toward Ethan. "Ethan, please come forward." For a moment, Ethan thought he had heard the wrong name. He looked around in surprise. The people beside him smiled and gently moved aside. Slowly, Ethan walked to the front of the hall. Every step felt heavier than the last. He stood before the king with respect. The king placed his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You never tried to impress me," he said. "You never asked for praise. You cleaned the road because people needed help. You brought an empty pot because you chose honesty. You returned the wallet because your character was worth more than gold. Again and again, your actions spoke louder than your words." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He remembered his mother. He remembered the difficult days. He remembered every small choice he had made. He never thought those small actions would bring him here. The king gently placed the royal crown on Ethan's head. The palace became silent for 1 second. Then loud applause filled the hall. People smiled. Some people cried. Even the rich merchant stepped forward and shook Ethan's hand. "You truly deserve this," he said. The brave soldier smiled. "I have learned something today," he said. "Real strength comes from a good heart." The old teacher nodded with pride. "This is the greatest lesson of all." The king looked at the people one last time. "Never judge a person by beautiful words," he said. "Watch their actions." Words can be forgotten. Actions stay in people's hearts forever. The people left the palace with smiles on their faces. They did not remember the speeches. They remembered Ethan. They remembered his honesty. They remembered his kindness. They remembered his choices. That day, the whole kingdom understood one simple truth. Real respect is never asked for. It is earned through your actions. Chapter 6, Your Actions Create Your Identity. The days passed and Ethan began his new life as the leader of the kingdom. Many people thought the crown would change him, but they were wrong. Every morning he woke up early. He walked through the town instead of staying inside the palace. He greeted the shopkeepers. He spoke kindly to the farmers. He sat with old people and listened to their stories. He smiled at children as they played in the streets. The people were surprised. They had never seen a leader like him before. Ethan remembered where he had come from. He remembered the small house where he lived with his mother. He remembered the days when they had very little food. Those memories kept him humble. He never forgot the lessons that had brought him to this place. The crown was on his head, but kindness was still in his heart. One evening, Ethan visited the old king. The old king was sitting quietly in the palace garden. The sun was slowly setting behind the hills. Ethan sat beside him with a thankful heart. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "everything I have today is because you believed in me." The old king smiled and gently shook his head. "No, Ethan," he replied. "I believed in your actions." Many people wanted to become the leader. They spoke with confidence. They made big promises. But you never tried to prove yourself with words. You proved yourself with your choices. Every small action showed me the kind of person you really were. Ethan became silent. He remembered the broken road. He remembered the empty pot. He remembered the wallet full of gold. At that time, those moments had looked very small. Now he understood that every one of those choices had quietly built his future. Years later, children across the kingdom heard Ethan's story in their schools. Parents shared it with their families at dinner. Teachers repeated it in their classrooms. People no longer talked about how rich Ethan was or how powerful he had become. They talked about his honesty. They talked about his kindness. They talked about the way he treated people. That was his real identity. One day, a young boy asked Ethan, "How can I become a great person?" Ethan smiled warmly and answered, "Start with one good action today. Tell the truth. Keep your promise. Help someone who needs you. Work hard even when nobody is watching." These small actions may not change your life today, but they will change who you become tomorrow. Now this story comes to you. Every morning, life gives you a new chance. You can choose honesty instead of lies. You can choose kindness instead of anger. You can choose hard work instead of excuses. You can choose respect instead of pride. Every choice is writing your future. Every action is building your character. One day, people may forget what you said. They may forget what you owned, but they will always remember how you treated them. Never forget the lesson of this story. Your words tell people what you think, but your actions tell people who you are. Your actions create your identity. If this story helped you learn English and gave you a new lesson for life, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for more easy English stories. Now tell me in the comments, what is one good action you will start today? I am waiting to read your answer.